A dare at a party made me kiss the coldest girl at Blackwood University. She was supposed to laugh in my face and let her friends laugh with her. Instead, she caught my wrist before I could step back, and against my ear, low enough that only I could hear it over the music, she said 4 words that took 4 years of being furniture and burned them down to the studs. Do it again. Subscribe to the channel, and let's go back to where it actually started, 3 weeks before that night, in a hallway that smelled like burnt coffee and other people's perfume. My name is Ren Calloway. I was 20 years old, on a scholarship that renewed itself every semester like a threat, and I had perfected the art of taking up no space at all. I knew the exact width of Hargrove Hall's east corridor, 6 feet, 4 inches, measured in the number of times I'd flattened myself against the lockers to let Delacroix Vance girls pass without touching me. I knew which professors pretended not to notice when my shoes had duct tape holding the sole on. I knew the particular sting of a girl named Petra Voss looking straight through me like I was a smudge on a window she hadn't gotten around to cleaning. What nobody at Blackwood knew, because I had made very sure of it, was that I could still play. Not recitals, not competitions, just the practice room on the 3rd floor of the music building at 11 at night, when the janitor let me in because I'd once fixed the coffee machine in the faculty lounge, and he'd decided I was worth the risk. I played until my hands remembered things my mouth had stopped saying out loud. I played the way other people cried. The other thing nobody knew was that I had been quietly, uselessly aware of Lark Ashworth since orientation week, the way you're aware of weather coming in over a lake. Everyone called her the Ashworth Ice, and they said it with the particular respect people reserve for things that could kill them. She ran 3 student-facing companies before she'd finished her sophomore year, sat on the board of Ashworth Group at an age when most of us were failing organic chemistry, and had a face that did not apologize for anything, ever. Rumor had it she'd buried both parents by 19 and raised her little sister out of a townhouse 3 blocks from campus with the same efficiency she brought to a merger. Rumor also had it that she had never, not once, been seen wanting anything. I found that last part interesting. I noticed things. It was the one skill nobody had ever managed to bully out of me, a strange, useless-seeming gift for catching what didn't fit. A held breath in a room full of exhales, a pause half a second too long before an answer. I'd had it since I was small, sitting under my mother's piano while she tuned it string by string, learning to hear the note that was almost right and calling it out before she could. She used to say I had ears like open windows. After she died, the piano got sold to cover the funeral, and the windows stayed open with nothing coming through them for a long time. 3 weeks before the dare, I was in that hallway when Petra Voss knocked a full cup of iced coffee out of my hand. Accidentally, she said, in the voice of someone who has never once done anything by accident. And it went down the front of the one blazer I owned that didn't have a hole in it. Her friends laughed the way a pack laughs, in unison, like they'd rehearsed it. I bent down to pick up the cup because someone had to, and when I straightened up, Lark Ashworth was standing at the end of the hall, watching with an expression I couldn't read and didn't try to. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The Ashworth Ice didn't involve herself in things that weren't hers, and I was, emphatically, not hers. I told myself that was the end of it. I mopped coffee off my collarbone in a bathroom stall and told myself a lot of things. Then Dee Okafor, my roommate and the only person at Blackwood who had ever chosen me on purpose, dragged me to a party I didn't want to go to, in a house on Faircloth Street that belonged to somebody's parents and smelled like spilled beer and somebody's expensive cologne trying too hard. There was a game. There is always a game. A bottle spun on a coffee table ringed with water stains, and it stopped obscenely, precisely, pointing at me and then, on the second spin, at her. Lark Ashworth, across the circle, arms crossed, looking at the bottle like it had personally disappointed her. The room went quiet in the specific way a room goes quiet right before it decides to be cruel for entertainment. Someone said her name like a dare inside the dare. She didn't move. Neither did I. For 4 full seconds, I counted them, because counting things was what I did instead of feeling them. And then I crossed the circle because staying frozen felt worse than whatever was about to happen. And I kissed the coldest girl at Blackwood University in front of 40 people who expected it to be a joke. It was not a joke for very long. Her hand came up to my jaw, careful, like she was checking something was real. She smelled like vetiver and gunmetal, cold and sharp, and underneath it, something that wasn't cold at all. When I pulled back, flushed, mortified, already composing the apology I'd give Dee in the car, Lark didn't let go of my wrist. "Do it again," she said, quiet enough that it was only for me, and the whole party might as well have been on the other side of the world. I did not, at that moment, understand that I had just started the hardest and best year of my life. I only knew that for the first time in longer than I could count, someone had looked directly at me and not looked through me. It should not have undone me the way it did. It did anyway. The rest of that night is a blur of Dee's hand on my back, steering me toward the door, of Petra Voss's face across the room doing something complicated and furious, of Lark's eyes following me all the way out. I didn't know yet that Petra had history with Lark thick enough to choke on. I didn't know that Lark's father had a doctrine about control that had cost her more than any of us understood. I didn't know that in 8 months I would stand in front of half of Blackwood's board of trustees and prove, with nothing but my own 2 ears, that everything they thought they knew about me was a lie someone had built on purpose. I only knew that when I got back to my dorm, I sat at the edge of my bed with my heart going like a struck bell, and I thought, I want that to happen again. I want it so badly, I don't have a place to put it. I didn't know yet that I'd get my wish, and that it would nearly cost us both everything. For the next 4 days, nothing happened, which was its own kind of torture. I went to my shifts at Tilly's Diner off Route 9, wiped down the counter, memorized the specials, and did not think about vetiver and gunmetal every time the bell over the door rang. Dee informed me, unhelpfully, that the Ashworth Ice did not attend parties, had not attended a party in recorded campus history, and had shown up to that one for reasons nobody could explain. Dee found this hilarious. I found it unbearable. On the 5th day, she was sitting in my section at Tilly's at 9:40 on a Tuesday night, in a coat that cost more than my tuition, reading a folder of contracts like the cracked vinyl booth was her office. "Coffee," she said, "black, and whatever you'd order for yourself, because I don't trust the menu." I brought her the grilled cheese with pear jam, the one my mother used to make, the one I still made when nobody was watching, because it was the only thing left of her that fit in my hands. Lark ate half of it before she looked up. "You made this," she said. It wasn't a question. "I did." "Good," she said, and went back to her contracts, and I stood there with my heart, doing something complicated, understanding for the first time that I had just been noticed by someone whose noticing came with weight. That was the night everything really started, not the party. This, a girl with ice in her name, eating a grilled cheese I made with my own hands in a diner that smelled like burnt coffee, looking up at me like I was the most interesting problem she'd been handed in years. She came back the next Tuesday. And the one after that? By the 3rd week, she wasn't reading contracts anymore. She was watching me work, in the unhurried way of someone with nowhere else she'd rather be, and asking questions that had nothing to do with grilled cheese. What I was studying. why I never sat in the front row of any lecture hall, whether I'd noticed that the diner's ice machine had a rattle in it that meant the compressor was 2 months from dying. Because I had noticed, of course I had. I noticed everything with a sound attached to it, and when I said so, she looked at me the way you look at something you've been searching for without knowing its name. You hear things other people miss, she said. It's not a useful skill. It is if you're listening to the right things, she said, and paid for a meal she'd barely touched and left a tip that made my manager ask if I'd slept with a senator. I hadn't. I'd done something stranger. I'd let the Ashworth ice see me exactly as I was, tired, broke, coffee-stained, unglamorous, and instead of looking away, she kept coming back for more. The trouble started the way trouble always does at Blackwood, quietly, through people who smiled while they did it. My Aunt Marisol, whose apartment I'd been renting a corner of since my mother died, had never liked having me there. She liked it less when a photo surfaced online. Someone at that party had filmed the last half-second of the kiss, just enough to make it look staged, cheap, deliberate, with a caption calling me a scholarship girl, clawing her way into Ashworth money. Marisol didn't ask if it was true. She set my duffel bag by the door on a Thursday night with the kind of finality that didn't invite negotiation, told me I'd brought it on myself, and locked the door behind me before I'd made it down the stairs. I stood on the sidewalk at 11 p.m. with everything I owned in one bag, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know where to go. Dee's dorm was a single. Tilly's didn't open until 6. I called the only other number I had memorized, not because I expected anything, but because my hands did it before my brain could stop them. Lark Ashworth answered on the second ring, and when I finished explaining, badly, through a throat that wouldn't cooperate, there was a silence on the line so complete I thought she'd hung up. Then, she said, "Where are you standing right now?" "Exactly. I'm sending a car." I said I couldn't accept that. She said I wasn't being given a choice, and for once in my life, being told no wasn't cruelty. It was the first door that had opened for me in years, and I walked through it, because the alternative was the sidewalk. The car took me not to a dorm, but to a townhouse on Ashgrove Lane, with a wrought iron gate and a doorbell that chimed like a cathedral. Lark met me on the front steps in sweatpants and an old university hoodie, hair down, nothing like the girl in the boardroom photos the campus paper loved to run. Behind her, in the doorway, stood a small girl of about 8 in dinosaur pajamas, staring at me with the frank, assessing gaze of someone deciding whether I was a threat or a friend. "That's Josie," Lark said. "My sister." "Josie, this is Wren. She's staying in the blue room. Is she your girlfriend?" Josie asked, with zero shame, the way children ask the questions adults spend years learning to swallow. "We're working on it," Lark said before I could answer, and something in my chest cracked open in a way that had nothing to do with grief. The house was enormous in a way that made me feel like a smudge on someone else's window again. Floors that gleamed, staff who moved like they'd been trained not to be seen, a kitchen bigger than Marisol's whole apartment. A woman named Mrs. Fenwick, gray-haired and unimpressed, looked me up and down in the doorway and said nothing at all, which felt worse than an insult. I didn't sleep much that first night, not because the bed wasn't comfortable, it was the softest thing I'd ever lain on, but because I kept waiting for someone to tell me it was a mistake. Lark found me at 2 a.m. in the kitchen, unable to sleep, making tea I didn't actually want just to have something to do with my hands. "You don't have to earn this," she said from the doorway, arms crossed, vetiver and gunmetal cutting through the smell of chamomile. "I know that's what you're doing. Calculating what you owe me." "Stop. I don't know how to stop," I told her, honestly, because something about the dark and the quiet made honesty easier. I've never been given anything I didn't pay for first. She crossed the kitchen slowly, giving me every chance to step back, and didn't touch me until I hadn't. Her thumb brushed my jaw, the same place it had at the party, careful in a way that felt like a question. "Tell me to stop," she said, "and I will." "Don't," I said, and that was the second time I ever kissed her, quieter than the first, longer, with nobody watching and nothing to prove. When we broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine for one long moment, breathing me in like she was memorizing something. "You smell like clementine peel and warm vanilla," she said. It's been 3 weeks, and I still can't stop noticing it. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing, and let the silence be enough. It was the first time in years that silence had felt like safety instead of absence. I should have known it wouldn't last. Nothing that good ever gets to, not without a fight first. Petra Voss had known Lark since they were 12 years old, long enough to have a claim she believed was owed to her, and long enough to hate me on sight for the crime of being wanted without trying to be. I learned, in pieces, over the weeks that followed, that Petra's family, Voss Consolidated, held a minority stake in Ashworth Group, and that Desmond Ashworth, Lark's father, had spent years cultivating the idea that a Voss-Ashworth merger, sealed with something more permanent than paperwork, would stabilize the company after his wife's death nearly sank it. Lark had never agreed to it. She had also never publicly refused it, because refusing it meant a fight with the one parent she had left, and the Ashworth Ice, it turned out, had exactly one thing she was afraid to lose. I found this out the way I found out most things, sideways, in a room where people forgot I was listening. It was a Sunday, 3 weeks into living at Ashgrove Lane, and I'd gone downstairs for water and stopped outside Desmond Ashworth's study because his voice had the particular flatness of a man delivering an order dressed as advice. "The Voss girl is patient," he was saying. "Patience like that has a price. Whatever this is with the scholarship girl, end it before the board starts asking why my daughter's judgment is compromised by someone who can't even pay her own rent." "I'm not ending anything," Lark said, and her voice had gone somewhere I hadn't heard it go before. Not cold, but braced. Like a wall taking weight. "Then be prepared to explain to the board why Ashworth Group's stock dipped 2 points the week photos of your scholarship charity project went viral," he said. "Sentiment is not a strategy, Lark. I didn't wait for more. I went back upstairs with my water untouched, and I didn't tell her I'd heard. Not that night. I told myself I was protecting her from having to know that I knew. Really, I think I was protecting myself from what it meant, that I wasn't just an inconvenience to Petra Voss. I was a liability with a dollar figure attached, and I had no idea how to fight a war that got fought in boardrooms with numbers instead of fists. The reveal, when it came, wasn't from Desmond. It was from Lark herself, 2 nights later. In the music room at the end of the East Hall that I hadn't known the house had until she led me to it. "There's a piano," she said. Like it was nothing. Like it wasn't the first thing that had made me cry in that house. "I had it tuned last week. I don't know why I did that before I asked if you even wanted it." "I want it," I said, before I could stop myself, my hand already on the lid. I sat down and played the first thing that came. A half-formed thing I'd been composing for 2 years without ever finishing it, something with no name that I'd started the week my mother died, and never known how to end. Lark stood in the doorway and listened with an expression I'd never seen a rich person wear for me before. Not politeness, not indulgence. Attention, the real, unguarded kind. "I have to tell you something," she said when I finished, and sat beside me on the bench, close enough that our shoulders touched. "My father wants me bonded to Petra Voss by the time I'm 22. It's business." It's always been business to him. My mother died running herself into the ground, trying to prove that love and duty could be the same thing, and he decided the lesson was that love was the mistake. Control is strength, he used to say. I believed him for a long time. Do you still? I asked. No, she said, and turned to look at me instead of the keys. Not since a girl with iced coffee down her collar looked at me like I was a person instead of a headline. I should have felt only warmth at that. Instead, underneath it, cold settled in. Because I understood, finally and completely, what I'd walked into. I wasn't just falling for the coldest girl at Blackwood. I was standing in the blast radius of a war she hadn't chosen and couldn't walk away from, and Petra Voss was not going to let either of us leave that room unscathed. She proved it 3 days later, in the worst way she had available to her. It started with a video. Not the party clip, something new, cut and spliced to make it look like Lark had scripted the entire kiss in advance. A staged stunt to manufacture sympathy for the company's flagging stock, with me cast as a paid actress hired for the part. It hit the campus forums at 2:47 in the morning. By 7, it had 4,000 shares. By breakfast, it had a headline on the business section of a paper Desmond Ashworth's rivals loved to read. Lark found me in the kitchen holding my phone with both hands like it might go off. It's not real, I said, uselessly, because of course she knew that. I know, she said, but her jaw had gone tight in a way I recognized now, the wall going up brick by brick. This is Petra. This is exactly how she operates. Sweet as sugar to your face, and a knife in every hand you can't see. What are we going to do? I asked. I'm going to handle it, she said, and something in the way she said it, flat, final, already deciding to do this without me, made my stomach drop before I understood why. You mean you're going to handle it alone? I said. She didn't answer, and that silence was its own answer, and it was the first time since the diner that I felt her start, quietly, to pull away. I understood it, even as it hurt. She'd spent her whole life being told that love was a liability you managed by keeping people at a controlled distance, and now the first person she'd let close was under attack because of her, and every instinct her father had drilled into her said the solution was to build the wall higher and keep me safe behind it, alone, unbothered, uninvolved. I'm not going to sit in a guest room while you fight my battle for me, I told her. This isn't your battle, Ren, it's mine. It's been mine since I was 12 years old. It has my face in the video, I said. It's mine too. She didn't have an answer for that, not yet, and the silence between us that morning was the first cold I'd felt in that house since I'd arrived. The fallout moved fast, the way it does when money is involved. Blackwood's dean of students called me in within 48 hours, citing the video, citing the scholarship's morality clause, citing donor concern, and told me, with the studied gentleness of someone who has fired people before, that my funding was under review pending an investigation into what he called the appearance of impropriety. I sat in his office in the one blazer I'd bought to replace the coffee-stained one and understood, with total clarity, that I was about to lose the only thing that had ever been entirely mine, my education, earned, not given. Because of a video I hadn't made and a kiss I didn't regret. Lark offered, that night, to call the dean herself, to write a check that would make the whole morality clause conversation disappear. I told her no. I meant it as more than pride. I meant it because I understood, watching her reach for her checkbook like it was a reflex, that if I let her buy my way out of this one, I would spend the rest of whatever we became waiting to be bought out of the next thing too, and I could not build a life on that foundation, not even with her. I have to prove it's fake, I said. Not you, me. You don't have the resources to do that, she said, not unkindly, just true. I have ears, I said. Give me 48 hours. She looked at me for a long moment, and something in her face shifted, not doubt, exactly, recognition. The look of someone realizing the person in front of her wasn't going to be managed like a problem, not even by someone who loved her. 48 hours, she said, and then I step in, whatever it takes. Deal, I said, and went to find D, because I couldn't do this with my ears alone. I needed someone who understood the difference between what a microphone catches and what a splice leaves behind. Dee and I spent 2 nights in her dorm room with 3 energy drinks and a pair of studio headphones borrowed from the music department, running the leaked video frame by frame, second by second. To everyone else, it sounded like a party. To me, it sounded wrong in a way I'd been hearing wrong sounds my whole life, a room tone that shifted 8 seconds before Lark's voice started, a hollow half-second of silence where a splice had been smoothed, but not quite smoothed enough. I'd spent a childhood under a piano learning to hear the note that was almost right. This was the same skill, aimed at a different kind of lie. There, I said, at 1:12 a.m., pointing at the waveform on Dee's laptop screen. That gap. That's where they cut Lark's real reaction and pasted in audio from somewhere else. Find me the somewhere else, and we're done. It took Dee another 6 hours and a contact in the campus radio station to trace the spliced audio back to a rehearsal recording from a scholarship gala 8 months earlier, a recording that had, notably, been produced under Petra Voss's own supervision as head of the event committee. The metadata hadn't been scrubbed. Petra was careful about people. She'd never learned to be careful about sound. We had it. Proof, clean and undeniable, that the viral video was a fabrication built by someone with motive, means, and a paper trail leading straight back to her own hard drive. I called Lark at 6 a.m, my voice raw from no sleep, and told her what we'd found. Bring it to my father's board meeting, she said, without hesitation, and I could hear the wall in her voice starting, finally, to come down. 12 o'clock today. I'll get you in the room. I have never in my life wanted to be seen more, and never been more afraid of it than I was walking into that boardroom at noon. Ashworth Group's board met in a room on the 40th floor, with windows on 3 sides, the whole city spread out under a flat winter sky. And I stood at the head of the table in the blazer that no longer had a coffee stain, holding a laptop that held the truth. Desmond Ashworth sat at the far end with the particular stillness of a man who did not yet know he was about to lose. Petra Voss sat 2 seats down from him, composed, sweet-faced, already smiling the smile of someone who thought she'd won. Lark stood beside me, not behind her father's chair. Beside me. I don't usually address rooms like this, I said, and my voice only shook a little. But I'm told you all saw a video of me a few days ago and drew some conclusions about who I am and what I want from your company. I'd like to correct the record. I played the waveform on the screen behind me, walked them through the gap, the splice, the mismatched room tone that any trained ear would catch and most untrained ones would never notice. Then I played the metadata, the timestamp, the account name attached to the original gala recording, Petra Voss, event chair, 8 months prior, unmodified file untouched until 4 days ago. The room went very quiet, the specific quiet of powerful people recalculating in real time who was dangerous and who wasn't. This is absurd. Petra's composure cracked first around the eyes. Anyone could have accessed that file. Anyone with your login credentials, Dee said from the doorway, holding up a second laptop with the access log Petra hadn't thought a scholarship kid's roommate would know how to pull. Logged in at 1:52 a.m., 4 nights ago. Your dorm's Wi-Fi network. Want me to read out the MAC address, too? Petra didn't answer. She didn't get the chance to, because Desmond Ashworth had gone very still in his chair, doing the math a man like him always does first, not about right and wrong, but about liability, about what a fabrication scandal involving a business partner's daughter would cost the Voss-Ashworth merger he'd spent years building. That is not the only thing you should know, Lark said, stepping forward, and her voice had none of the ice the campus called her by. It was low, and it was furious. And it was, for the first time in that room, entirely her own. Petra has spent 3 weeks feeding false statements to a family court contact about my fitness to raise my sister, using this fabricated video as evidence. I have the emails. I have the contact's name. You are going to want to sit very still while I decide whether this becomes a criminal matter or just the end of your family's stake in this company. Lark, Desmond started, in the voice of a man trying to regain control of a room that had already left him behind. You don't get to use the word control with me today, she said, without raising her voice at all, which was somehow worse than shouting. You spent 19 years telling me love was a weakness and control was strength. I just watched a girl with nothing hand you proof, in your own boardroom, that the only person in this building who's ever tried to control anything through lies is sitting 2 seats to your left. Decide, right now, whether you want to keep pretending that was strength. The vote, when it came, wasn't close. Petra Voss's family severed the merger talks within the hour to protect what remained of their own name, and the dean's office, informed by the very same board members who'd been ready to strip my scholarship 4 days earlier, closed its investigation into me before the end of the week with a formal letter of apology I still have folded in my desk drawer. I stood at the window afterward, the city spread out below, and Lark came to stand beside me, close enough that vetiver and gunmetal chased the last of the adrenaline out of my chest. I almost lost you trying to protect you, she said. I'm not doing that again. Whatever comes next, we do it standing next to each other. That's the only version of this I want. Say it again, I said, half a joke, echoing a night at a party that felt 100 years old. She laughed, actually laughed, a sound I'd only heard twice before, both times with me, and said, I love you. Do you need that one again too? Or did it land the first time? It landed, I told her, and it did, all the way down. Winter came fast after that, the way it does in this part of the country, and Blackwood's campus dressed itself in white for the annual scholarship gala the same week finals ended. It was, by tradition, the biggest event of the academic year, held in the university's old concert hall, funded in no small part by Ashworth Group, and this year, quietly and without fanfare, by a matching gift Lark had made specifically to the scholarship fund I'd nearly lost. So that no other student in my position would ever stand in a dean's office wondering if the thing they'd earned could be taken by rumor alone. I hadn't planned on performing. I'd spent 4 years hiding the fact that I could. But Lark had asked, quietly, 2 weeks before, whether I might play just one piece, and something about the way she asked, not as a request, but as an offer, entirely mine to refuse, made me say yes before I'd fully decided to. I played the piece I'd started the week my mother died, the one with no name, the one I'd never finished because I hadn't known, for years, what ending it deserved. I finished it that night, in front of 400 people who had spent a semester believing I was either invisible or a scandal, and when the last note faded, the silence that followed wasn't the studied kind. It was the kind that happens right before real applause, the kind I had told her once, in the dark, that I'd always wanted to hear just once in my life. I got it. All 400 people on their feet, and Josie in the front row shouting my name loud enough to be heard over the rest of them, and Lark in the second row, not clapping at all, just watching me with an expression that looked, for the first time since I'd met her, entirely undefended. Afterward, in the hallway behind the concert hall, she took both my hands in hers, careful, deliberate, the way she touched everything that mattered. "Tell me to stop," she said, "and I will." "Don't," I said. And this time when she leaned in, it wasn't a kiss. It was her mouth at my throat, at the place where scent gland meets pulse, and every part of me went still and certain and unafraid. "Ask me with your words," I told her, because I wanted to hear it, once, out loud, in a hallway that smelled like her and me and nothing else. "Will you let me claim you, Wren Calloway?" she asked, low, steady, no ice in it anywhere. "Not because anyone dared us into it. Because I choose you, on purpose, every day, for as long as you'll have me." "Yes," I said, and then again, because some words deserve repeating. "Yes, do it again, and mean it forever this time." She did. The bite was gentle and certain, and the bond that opened between us afterward felt like a window finally letting something all the way through, warm and unbroken, and entirely mine to keep. 6 months later, we stood in the same music room where she'd first shown me the piano, except now there was a second piano beside it, smaller, painted the pale yellow Josie had insisted on, because 8-year-olds have opinions about interior design, and nobody in that house argued with Josie anymore. Desmond Ashworth had resigned his board seat that spring. Quietly, after an internal review found more than one instance of his complicity in the pressure campaign against his own daughter. Petra Voss's family had relocated out of state after her expulsion from Blackwood went public, her name a cautionary tale in every incoming freshman orientation packet for the next 3 years. Mrs. Fenwick, who had never said an unkind word to me, and never a particularly warm one either, left a small parcel on my bed that spring, a hand-knit cardigan, soft blue, with a note that said only, "For the girl who plays like she means it," and I understood, finally, that I had been let all the way in. A year to the day after that party on Faircloth Street, Lark got down on one knee in the music room, in front of the piano my mother never got to hear me finish, and asked me to marry her the way she asked for everything that mattered, plainly, with her whole attention, no hedging left in her at all. Josie, who had been let in on the plan weeks earlier and had guarded the secret with the ferocious pride of an 8-year-old trusted with something enormous, burst into the room the second I said yes, shouting that she'd known it the whole time. She'd known it since the dinosaur pajamas. We were married the following spring in the garden behind the Ashgrove house. Small, warm, nothing like the boardroom that had once nearly ended us. I wore my mother's cardigan under my dress, because some things you carry with you on purpose. Lark wore vetiver and gunmetal and, for once, an expression with nothing guarded left in it. Morning light came through the music room windows the day after the wedding, the way it always did, gold and ordinary and entirely ours. I sat at my mother's second piano, the one Lark had quietly restored the same week I moved in, though I hadn't known it until months later. The same instrument I'd thought was gone forever, tracked down through 3 secondhand shops and rebuilt key by key, and I played the piece with no name one more time, finished now, complete, with an ending it had taken me 20 years and one dared kiss to find. Lark stood in the doorway, the way she had the very first night, listening the way only she ever had. I used to think being invisible was safer than being seen. I know now that safety was never the thing I was missing. It was this. Someone who heard me before I ever said a word, and asked every single day since if I wanted her to do it again. I always do. The end. If this story found the ache in you that remembers what it felt like to be overlooked and the relief of finally being chosen on purpose, you already understand why Wren and Lark's story mattered so much to tell. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. There's always another quiet girl about to be seen, another cold heart about to thaw on purpose. And I'd love to know, if you'd been standing in that circle at the party, would you have crossed it, knowing what it might cost you, or held your ground and let the bottle keep spinning? Tell me in the comments. Until next time, keep believing someone out there is listening for you the way Wren always listened for the truth. I'll see you in the next story.